If you're watching this video, it's pretty obvious you want to get into Section 8, build a profitable portfolio. So who is this video for and who is it not for? This is for business owners, entrepreneurs, high-earning salespeople, online coaches, people making over $15K a month and have over $40,000 saved or have really good credit trying to get into it. This is not for people that have scarcity mindset. This is not for people that are in positions that never took risk before, people that don't have money in place, and this is also for people that don't have the credit in place. This is not something that you are saying that you cannot really do. It's just not a matter of your time. And if you stay till the end, you're learning about the whole process, even makes sense for you. So once you're in that position, you can see if it makes sense for you to work with us. Alongside that, the other products we have that could potentially help you. Let's go to the next slide. So who am I to talk about this information that I am about to obviously talk about? So you're in a position where you know that I'm actually qualified. My name is Xavier Vega. I'm in a position where I have a 7-figure real estate portfolio, about 20 years old, no rich parents, no handouts, single mother of 4. Not have any W-2s because I was 20 years old when I was building this, 1099s, or a lot of reported income because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, let me write off everything. It's on the move. Also did not have a ton of experience. This is me signing with a notary on the most recent property. This is a different property we bought, completely different signing. And alongside that, this is our program, which is on a baseboard. So it's not just me doing this. It's also people on our program like Ricardo, Palmero, Freddie, Alexis, Diego, obviously myself. Obviously, this is all the terms in this regard. This is not something that I would say necessarily makes sense for you if you're in that position where you're, fully educated. But I want you to keep this in mind that it's not just me doing this, right? It's not something that I got lucky at one time and I just said, let me go and act like I'm like a big preacher of it or all the above, right? Like the best motive ever. So there's probably other methods you heard about, right? You heard about Airbnb. You've probably heard about something else that's obviously a little bit different, like crypto. You've heard about short-term rentals, traditional, pad splits, all the above. But the reason why I never did anything like this is because I understood that with something like a recession that just happened, I don't want to be in a position where it's contingent upon that, right? Essentially meaning that I'm in a position where one more recession comes in and I'm fucked, right? In an Airbnb space, right? What a lot of people don't talk about, yeah, you can make a lot of money, fast returns, either arbitrage or you're owning it, but you're in a position where if it's arbitrage, you don't own it, you don't get any of the depreciation, tax benefits at all. And alongside that, if you do own it, you're liable when you're in a position where the slow months, same way you are with arbitrage method. There was a 72% decline in COVID with Airbnb. Alongside that, when you're doing it traditionally, there was $400 million in unpaid rent. Yeah, that was which just mind-boggling from the traditional side. That's the reason why I didn't push for that. You probably tried one of these. You felt iffy. You're in a position where you're not sure which one made the most sense. You want the highest return, but you're also in a position where you want the actual ownership, right? The arbitrage method and cold calling to get landlords to rent out to you so you can sublease it didn't really make sense to you. That's something that I was in a position where I did. And I remember that vividly. I remember seeing the 2-2. I was like, why the hell am I going to want to build somebody else's portfolio, allow them to get the equity, get all the benefits of the real estate property while I'm in a position where I get all the legwork? And you're probably in a position where you have the funds saved. You also understand that, if your money's not moving, it is dying, but you're not in a situation where you want to leave it all in stock because you pay capital gains tax if you sell it. And alongside that, you're not trying to look about what the best stock is. You're not trying to put it into S&P 500. You're not really trying to do that. Maybe you have a 401k and you're like, okay, I know I understand I need investment. What the fuck do I actually need to do, right? That actually makes sense for my situation. If you look at inflation rate, right, 3%. Let's just talk numbers here. 3%. The average high yield savings account is going to give you maybe 3% to 4%. So if you're in a position where you're in a very good situation and you get 4% from your high yield savings account annually, you are barely growing 1% every single year. Stock market. Obviously, the inflation is in a position where it's at 3% to 4%. They're obviously depending on the year. So you get 10%. You're growing at 6%. Like you saved $100,000, only make $6,000. And that's it. No appreciation, no tax benefits that are as great as real estate, no depreciation, not really any write-offs. Alongside that, let me explain why I chose Section 8 as someone that's 20 years old, still a college student, and in a position where I don't know why this thing is acting all weird. Boom, boom. The reason why I did this: guaranteed rents, no chasing tenants. I want to be in a position where it's a lower barrier to entry. It also could be done remotely. No need for traditional proof of income, no W-2s, none of that. If you're in a position where, say for example, you're a business owner, you don't report a lot of income, you can do this because it doesn't care about the amount of money that you report on income. It's just a matter of what you have in your bank statements and the fluctuations with what's called a DSCR loan. A DSCR loan basically goes off of if the property can self-sustain itself with the rents. This is the rent we got from one unit, $23.50. Mortgage payment's $800. You can do the math on that. This is just a miscellaneous expense that we had, but you do the math on that from one unit, right? Most cash on cash returns from California properties are going to be in a position where you're making like maybe 6%, 4%, but this is well over 20%. Alongside that, I understood that they're not going to get rid of Section 8, but trying to do it since the Reagan era. They have not got rid of it. Look at all the tax cuts the Section 8 cuts that Trump has tried to pass. They didn't have it passed since Reagan. and the Republicans, which are in positions where obviously they're on the same favorite side as Trump himself or all the other Republicans that try to pass in the past, are saying do not cut this. It's not something that's obviously going to be in a position where it's going anywhere anytime soon. Alongside that, over 9 million, probably around 10 million people now, right? This is 2023, but 2025, or even 9.5, are in a position where they live on Section 8. They rely on Section 8 to get by. If you remove this, it would make millions homeless overnight. Maybe make overstretched landlords foreclosing their properties. Why would you do that? Like as a sane government, why would you do that, right? So that's the reason why I kept them that. So let's identify a market and let's talk about your 3 pillars, right? I want to get into actual game, but I wanted to give you the pretense in regards to who I am, my situation, why I chose Section 8. So you need to identify a market and your 3 pillars. There's Ohio, Bakersfield. That's somewhere I just started buying right now. So I'm in those 2 markets. There's Toledo, Detroit, Jacksonville. But you have to identify your 3 pillars. And there's 2 sets of 3 pillars you need to identify: time, money, energy, cash flow appreciation, or the hybrid. Let's talk first about time, money, energy. And I want to talk about some case study breakdowns in regards to actual deals as opposed to just hypothetical knowledge, right? Let's go with this. This property that we bought, this is more of appreciation style, right? This property was in a position where the payment was right around $5,600 a month, right? With the financing that we did, we actually got paid to buy this property. We did 0% down, said that we were going to live in the property, did not live in the property, right? Alongside that, we were in a position where it already had 3 occupancies. So it was making $4,500 a month at a $5,600 a month basis, right? When you have someone that has occupancy already, those credits that they have those deposits that they put, the security deposit with the prior seller, becomes your credit towards your overall amount that you have to pay at the end of the deal, right? When you go and sign, you actually have to sign the amount, right? Alongside that, when you negotiate what are called closing costs, this basically just means the fees that are associated, like title, underwriting, a bunch of other miscellaneous, right? We were in a position where after we got that rollback, after we got that cash, that $4,500 deposits back to us, we were in a position where, since we closed right around the 28th and the first of the month was when rent is due, we're in a position where we had no mortgage payment. We got paid for this unit. But this property is purely for appreciation at $6,000 a month in terms of actual passive gross income, is in a position where it's probably only getting like $300 a month. But we got paid to buy this unit. But the appreciation on this would be gnarly because we bought it for $740,000. You know what I'm saying? So let's go deeper into other deals. But like I said, this is something you could eventually do. It's just a matter of understanding how to analyze a deal, underwrite it, have the right of financing, and make sure you're buying the same thing. But that's something we get into a lot further in the video. Let's get into the actual allocation of criteria in regards to buying a property that is Section 8 out of state, or if you're trying to buy something in California, if it somehow makes, right? But typically in California, it needs to be multifamily, like the one I just showed you, or it's not going to make sense. It's not going to cash flow unless it has ADUs. So the reason why we're doing 3-bed, 1-bath, prefer 4 is because the higher the bedroom count, the higher the amount of money you're going to make, right? Alongside that, with Section 8 paying per bedroom count, you need to be in a position where you're focusing on also the FMR, which is the rental rate. You go to Cleveland, FMR, find your county, and then you're going to look at the zip code. Do not just look at, so for example, Cuyahoga County. That's one very big county in regards to the Cleveland area. If you're in a position where you search Cuyahoga County FMR, and say for a 4-bed, it's $1,700 a month. That's what it says is the average, or like everything combined median. Most of the time, it's not going to be that. It'll probably be like $1,550 to maybe $1,600. But if you calculate off of $700 a month and it's barely profitable, you're going to be shit out of luck, because if you get 80% of that, you're fucked and you're underwater. You're upside down. Your loan probably won't even close. So you have to think about the zip code, go on Zillow, look up places in that area, have your property manager be in a position where they know the area and also what they have rented on that area. You need to be in a position where you identify that, go off a 20% deduction, and if you're still positive cash flow after that, then you still move it. 1925 or newer, because you want to be in a position where even if it's older, sometimes you can find nicer units. But 1925 and above, typically it's be all right. Typically 1950, but it's very hard to find something at 1950 above in like a Cleveland area. Typically you can find that in different places, like maybe even in Detroit or whatever. Remodel or modern. You want to be in a position where it's like this, because you're going to be dealing with individuals that have this voucher that they work so hard to get and did a lot to get in regards to waiting, all of the above, paperwork, and they don't want to use it on something that does not make sense, right? The property is not nice, unless they're really desperate and need to get into a unit. They're going to want something that's modern. They want to remodel because they want to maximize their voucher, right? You want to be careful buying multifamily out of state, simply because if you're in a position where someone has this voucher, like I said, they want to make the most of it. They're not going to want to sleep like there's somebody else in regards to a duplex, triplex, fourplex. You can pull off triplex, fourplex. If it's your first property, I wouldn't recommend it out of state because it's a lot harder and also requires a lot more maintenance. 1,500 square foot or less, because if you're in a position where you have a lot of maintenance, it's going to be a lot harder on yourself, as an investor when it comes to your bottom line, because one, if you're in a position where it's above 1,500 square feet, it requires a lot more maintenance. But if you're in a position where, say, for example, you're in a position where, like I said, it's 1,500 square feet or more, you're going to be in a position where it's also harder to sell it. Single family, like I said, large driveway. For some reason, Section 8 tenants seem to have a bunch of cars, but not enough money to pay for rent. And then away from main roads or highways. That's what we talk to your property manager, talk to the realtors. You don't want to be in a position where you have vacancy just because they don't want to do that. And basic colors. Do not get a property that's fucking pink, because who's going to want to waste their voucher on that? Also look for stuff that doesn't have a lot of yard work necessary. So this is an example on one property, right? And hopefully, let me see if it lets me pull it up. Let's see. Okay, this property right here. You see that it's obviously very new, remodeled. So you're in a position where you understand, okay, people will want to live in this. And it has hardwood floor, so you're not in a position where you have to worry about carpet. We're getting stained. The carpet's fine, whatever, it's not that big of a deal breaker. We obviously want to look into the mechanicals. Make sure that the mechanicals are all sorted out. You don't want to be in a position where you have a water heater base. So ask about the mechanicals before you even submit an offer, think about even having your realtor walk about it. Moreover, like I said, this property was in a position where the rent rate said it was like $1,625. 80% or close to 80% is $1,550. 10%, you want to be in a position where you're calculating all these numbers. If you go on realtor.com, it will give you all this breakdown, or you could actually get your credit pulled by a lender. It will give you the best terms possible in regards to the most accurate representation. But you want to be very, very conservative on your numbers, right? For example, this is at 4% closing cost, $5,100, right? If I'm in a position where I understand that I may need some sort of repair just to get rent ready, I would put this as 5,100, even though these numbers can get negotiated, because if you have those expenses, you're going to be in a position where they are not free. So you want to calculate them in your bottom line, because if you're really negotiating this property well, you probably come out of pocket $2,000 in closing costs, which will put you in a higher return. It'll probably put you at like 28 to maybe 32. But save that safety net of like $3,000 just so you're in a position where you're protecting your bottom line. And you run your numbers through this. You want the calculator, you can DM me, but it's really not that hard. Just punching in this, it will go and give you the down payment. Sometimes you have to adjust the closing costs to be around 4%. Still at a 24 cash on cash return. This is a return in your pocket. Multi-family hybrid, this is what I was talking about in regards to the difference between the three pillars of cash flow and appreciation. It's going to be in the middle, but you have to do multi-family, like I said, or you're going to be in a position where you either lose money or you're one fucking expense away from being underwater. So let's go to this real quick. So like this one, for example, is a buy box of multifamily. You want to be in a position where you're buying multifamily, like if you're saying in California, like how I mentioned, you want to be in a situation where you consider all of this. If you buy, sometimes there'll be single families that are listed as, there are multifamilies that are listed as single family. So you need to be in a position where you look at that. Do not just filter multifamily, because you need to be in a situation where you could look out for the single families with the ADU. That's the one that I had just bought. It was listed as single family instead of multifamily. If I would have filtered out only multifamily, I would have been in a position where I missed it. You have to weigh in the fact that it needs to have separate meters or at least sub meters. If not, you need to calculate your bottom line that you may have to install those, because it is a lot harder to have someone that's willing to go and share utilities, especially when they're in a position where maybe they're like elderly and they're not going to be using as much as like a family of 5. So you can't expect them to go and be in a position where there's no actual real like number differentiation and you're just assuming. So when you talk to your realtor or your property manager or whoever's walking the property, make sure you're in a position where they talk about if it's separate meters. If it has ADU, you want to make sure that's permitted. If it's not permitted, do not do it, because if you inherit that BS and then you're in a position where you get caught, you're going to be in a situation where they're going to make you tear it down. So do not inherit something that's unpermitted. Typically, that's the reason why they don't sell it. I mean, why they can't sell it. If it's sitting, it's probably because it's unpermitted. I prefer to have tenants in place if it's something in California. If they're at market rent. If they are not at market rent, I do not prefer to inherit them, because I do not want to raise rents on nobody, because they're going to come in and already have a negative connotation to me, because the first impression I made is that I'm going and raising their rent, right? So the reason why I do prefer it if it doesn't make sense, like the one we bought that was $740,000, because it's going to lower the security deposit. It's going to lower the amount of money you have to bring to the actual table. When it has, like I said, separate meters, it's going to be in a position where it's a lot easier to separate the utilities, make them pay it. Most listings do not mention this, so you need to ask it. Make sure, like I said, the tenants are at near or market rent. Be in a position where you identify the FMR and the rent rates of that area and actual data, not like renter meter, not just fucking whatever you've seen online in regards to like a quick Google search. Like you need to actually see that it's happened. If you're in a position where they're under market, typically you want them to be month to month. But honestly, I try to stay away from people that are under market rent, or at least not close, because if you're in a position where you raise rent, negative connotation, they don't want to pay it, they don't want to leave, or they're going to request you to give them money for them to leave. And also, do not buy it if it's under market rent, because if you're in a position where it needs work to go and be worth that amount of rent, sometimes it'd be hard to get that working because they're actually living there and they're not vacant, and it's not vacant. And alongside that, if you try to do a rent increase without the work, they're going to be in a position with like, what work is going to justify this rent increase? And most of the time, unless you're doing like insane amount of things, these tenants want the world. If you're not doing that, they're not going to go and do it. They're not going to go and pay the rent increase, or sometimes they actually just can't even afford it. It's harder in California. You don't want an eviction. Like I said, it's something you want to allocate the most of time. You want to allocate the most focus on maximizing time, money, and energy efficiency. With your first property, try to buy something that's turnkey or close, maybe with FHA 2 or 3K loan. No wall removals. They'll be doing door changes in terms of cancellations or ADU builds. I wouldn't want to be doing that. None of that. Just acquire, cash flow immediately, keep it simple if you're leveraging business credit or whatever. But back to what I was saying about vital steps. If you're in a position where, like I said, you have to analyze in terms of the comps, all of the above right here, the rentability, the private bedroom count, have your realtor walk the property before you submit an offer, or if you submit an offer, have a contingent upon them walking it to make sure that it's making sense. Basically saying that contingency is that if you do not like it, you're just going to leave based on this. Basically a reason on why you would want to leave. So you also want to see, like I said, in regards to the tenant situation, if your realtor walks in and you're in a position where the property is completely trashed, you're obviously not going to move it forward with that unit. How was the tenant? Get a feel for them. Maybe even have a property manager that if they go and give a quote on the estimate in terms of what the property would be worth to repair, so then you could use that in your negotiations, but also have them be in a position where hopefully the tenant is there, they can meet them, they can see if there's something you even want to inherit. If they're a cash tenant and they're out of state, from my experience, do not inherit them. Do not inherit them, because typically what they do is they're going to be in a position where they go and say, hey, well, this person's selling the property. They're not going to be able to chase me for rent. I'm just going to stop paying because the property's getting sold, right? Which I guess it makes sense, but in a position where it's going to extend your closing to the you're going to be in a position where they carry on that same trait. And 3 is just a nightmare you don't want to deal with. Just don't deal with it. Make sure, like I said, it's also in a position where it's desirable and away from main roads, but also in a situation where it's near things that need to be done. Verify lease agreements. Actually, I don't even care about lease agreements. You can have it, but don't even think about it as like a secondary document when you go to the DMV. Think about your rent deposits and actual like bank statements from money coming in as something that you would need to see. If they don't want to give it to you, or they want to make it a hard time, just back out of the fucking deal, in my opinion, because if they're not willing to be transparent about that, it's just not something that you want to even inherit in the first place. Because if they're selling something that's very good and it's cash flowing, unless it's a 1031 exchange, in my opinion, it doesn't even make sense. Like, why would you get rid of that unless you're like retiring or something? Like I said, this is where we're going to the next step, which I'm gonna talk about in regards to the realtor situation. Are you going to submit an offer, a listing, and lower your amount of money that you have to pay at the table, or are you going to go under market, but you're going to pay more fees just so you can be in a position where you did buy something underneath the market value? So let's go back to in regards to the contingencies I like to have, right? Contingency basically just means that you're in a position where you have a condition saying, I'm only going to buy it on the condition of this is being good, that is being good, right? Typically, the most common ones are inspection and appraisal. When you are going and buying your first unit, you want to make sure you have the right contingencies. Inspection, appraisal, tenant ledger, and rent deposits, and other necessary info, right? Alongside that, another one is insurance. With the current state of the insurance situation, if you're in a position where you don't say, hey, contingent upon insurance acquisition, if the property is older, it's going to be a lot harder. The reason why I say this is because sometimes you'll buy a property, it'll close, and they'll say, hey, you know what, I can't do this property anymore. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, why you do this to me after the fact? Why do you let this close? Make sure that in writing it shows that the insurance can insure this property. Alongside that, depending on my situation, like the property with the $740,000, I'll be in a situation where I go say, hey, look, I'm going to be in a position where I'm not paying the appraisal so you get ordered until I'm actually good with the inspection, because sometimes the appraisal will happen fast. You lose $715 simply because you didn't go and actually like the property and you didn't get the refund in time. Inspection comes back solid. Like I said, you do the pre-leasing, which is something I'm going to talk about. If you want this full document, I don't want to go and do too much blabbering on this, but if you want this full document, I'll go and give it to you. But this is something that we actively give to all of our members. So you're in a position where you have a whole step laid out because you need to write things down or else you're going to move incorrectly, right? Find property management. Facebook groups, Thumbtack, Google, Yelp, everything, and vet them hard. Find the property management before you actually find the realtor, because the property manager will refer you to somebody that is in a position where they work with investors, right? Pretty obvious. And two, there is no shortage of realtors at all. Really, the mom could be a fucking realtor, but there is a shortage of good property managers. Very hard to find a good property manager right now. So you be in a position where you line that up before you go doing all the other steps. And the reason why I wanted to go and talk about the other steps before I mentioned this, because I wanted to make sure that you had you caught attention to the whole process, but this made sure that you were checking. Or you can just work with us and be in a position to do that all for you. Let me go back to this. This is pretty simple. You just go and get a lender. You could go the same thing, go through all of those similar places I said in regards to all of these right here. Follow these exact same things. Go on Google, whatever. Create your LLC, Secretary of State, or Busy. That's a website that I like to use. Create your business bank account. That's going to make your life a lot easier. And also, they need an account for when the automatic withdrawals come out once you actually buy the property. Get all your documentation with a mortgage lender. They're going to give you a portal. You fill out the whole thing. It's going to be a lot easier when you're buying out of state as opposed to California because you're closing an LLC versus in your personal name. Finding a realtor, the exact same thing in this regard. Try to find a property management referral because, like I said, they're in a position where they either one, work with investors, hopefully they actually own property. The property management company will tell you that. And if they're in a position where the realtor that they're referring doesn't have property, or they do have property, but they're not working with the property management company, you can say, okay, well, if this property management company is so good, why are they not working with that realtor? Then you figure out that situation. Production, punctuality, action, knowledge. Production, obviously you want them to be doing deals. Punctuality, for obvious reasons. Action, obvious reasons. Knowledge, obvious reasons. But also, one thing I like to look for the most is people that actually own properties because they can underwrite deals in the sense of seeing what actually makes sense. Work with us, and you can have that done for you. Submit offers, analyze comps, be in a position where you look at what actually has sold. You could also be in a position where you have obviously a realtor do that. You have a wholesaler do that for you. But I would honestly focus on learning how to analyze them yourself for the time being if you're in a position where you're still looking for the property management, simply because you want to be in a position where you don't get blindsided by someone just trying to say that a good deal is in place for you, right? So once you actually have a property under contract in your position where you pass the inspection, you say that it's pretty solid, you pre-lease the property, right? You want to go and write a description with ChatGPT, put some pictures in there, talk about the whole thing in there. This is something that we did for one of our properties. We wanted to go and have a tenant at closing as opposed to waiting till the very end. Finding a tenant and placing them, obviously you want to be in a position where they view it first of all, because typically it's going to be very hard for a Section 8 tenant to go and pay, an application fee, especially if they haven't seen it. For some reason, they just don't want to do that. Most people actually don't want to do that. So make sure you're in a position where they actually see it, but I wouldn't go and be in a situation where you go and have like an open showing just because typically people don't want to have like a bunch of other traffic there. Sometimes it'll make them go and be in a situation where they convert a lot faster, but typically it's not going to be. Sometimes if you go out, I would do the mix of open and also private. When you're talking to a property manager, that's one of the questions I would ask them. How do you do it? They only do open, or they do a mix, or they only do private? How is the tenant in person? Are they respectful? Are they punctual? Are they appreciative? Are they capable? Or are they retired? In terms of capable, I mean, like, are they disabled? Are they in a position where, maybe they were injured? Maybe, they have some sort of maybe the mental disability. And the reason why I mention that is because then you're going to have to lay back in regards to the speed that you try to work with things. Obviously, you have to do above and beyond to get them to convert and get them to get your paperwork, because they're in a position where they're not as punctual as business owners, because they're not business owners. So to do the most. That's what I'm saying. Take into consideration, and you're not going to discriminate in regards to them being retired. Like, is this someone that is going to try and get off the program? Like, because then you have to think about that into your bottom line. Are you going to want to go? Are you going to have to pre-screen this property or pre-remarket this property again because this person wants to get off Section 8 in the next 2 years? Typically with these tenants, they don't want to. They're going to be in a position where it's 5 to 8 years, maybe even longer, that they're going to stay. Once you get the right tenant in place, you have guaranteed rent, start to cash flow, scale. It's easier said than done, but if it can be said, then it can be done. Let's go back to this. This is obviously me in a position where I'm marketing myself. If this does not make sense for you right now, that's perfectly fine. You could DM me. We have entry level products that potentially make sense for you. So you get ready a lot faster. A lot of people take advantage of those. But the main piece of advice that I want to give into this is identify your 3 pillars, identify your market, take the most amount of action, and be in a position where you calculate everything in regards to your whole bottom line, because that is what you want to protect with your soul. If you're in a position where you go back to this deal over here, let's go boom, boom, boom. Let's go over here. Let's go to this right here, right? If you're in a position where it shows like right here, it'll say $30,600 all in cost, right? Also factor in maybe $3,000 worth of holding costs, right? That's electricity, gas, water. Also in a position where you have maybe at the front of month's worth of vacancy, or just a payment in general, because the Section 8 timeline takes a little bit longer to actually get them approved, get you cash flowing. Like, you have to take all of that into consideration. Do not just think about money in, money out. Yeah, you may see the deposits and be like, oh shit, like we're gonna be thinking about time, money, energy. Also be in a position where you allocate reserve funds, and the slush funds is something that I struggle to do because I just want to scale. It did stress me out, and it did make things a lot harder. Allocate that slush fund, be in a position where you're very conservative. Alongside that, don't be scared to reinvest. Don't be scared to use OP. That's why I said this is something that if you're in a position where you've never really invested in anything before, and maybe a little bit harder, but not something that you definitely cannot do. So if you have any questions about this beyond everything that I just said, and you made it to the very end of this video, go and DM on Instagram. I'll talk about this whole regard. If you want any of the specific documents that are in this, just let me know, and I could go and make this the screen share slideshow, or the slideshow down screen sharing, completely free. I'll send it to you. You can read the whole thing over and over and over, read it to yourself, whatever. Just let me know. Appreciate y'all watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.